She said just a few words, and something inside him snapped. An ordinary phrase, an ordinary day. But something felt off. Her voice was too steady, the excuse too convenient. He wanted not to believe it, but the truth had already started to crawl beneath his skin like a splinter. And when her phone screen lit up on the table, everything suddenly made sense. From that moment on, there was no turning back. He didn't cause a scene, didn't ask questions. He just drove, quietly, coldly, like a man who already knows what he's going to find. But what he didn't yet know was the most painful part. Betrayal isn't the deepest wound. Far worse is realizing who someone truly is, especially when it's someone you trusted more than yourself, and when she's left alone, stripped of illusions, without a future, without him, he'll be nowhere in sight. Because sometimes silence speaks louder than any words ever could. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If you're here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends or family. It really helps my channel a lot. Please tell me in which city or country you watched this video. I value every one of your comments. So, let's get started. James sat frozen on the couch, the glow of the television flickering across the darkened room, though he wasn't absorbing a single frame. Earlier that day, Erin had casually mentioned an unexpected work trip scheduled for the weekend. Her voice had taken on that polished, composed tone she always used when discussing her career. She claimed it was a critical project, and that her supervisor, Russell, would be joining her to present ideas to an influential client. James tried to take her at her word, but something about the conversation left a sour taste. Russell's name seemed to surface every time Erin spoke of urgent work obligations. James had never warmed to the man. There was an unsettling presence about him, something James could never quite define, but he buried those feelings, unwilling to let paranoia corrode his marriage. After dinner, Erin went off to shower. James stayed behind, turning over her words again and again in his mind. He didn't want to be the husband who doubts his wife's integrity, but each mental replay made her story sound more rehearsed than genuine. Then came a sharp notification, the soft ding of an incoming text. Erin's phone, left on the dining table, lit up. James's eyes instinctively darted to the screen, and what he read stole the air from his lungs. Reservation confirmed. Master Suite, Ocean View, Sunset Breeze Hotel. The words struck like a blade to his chest. No version of a business meeting justified that. An upscale suite, a romantic beachfront resort. This wasn't business, it was personal. James slowly rose, as though moving too fast might cause him to unravel. His fingers trembled as he scribbled down the hotel name, confirmation details, and address on a nearby notepad. He returned her phone exactly as he'd found it, ensuring nothing looked disturbed. When Erin came back into the room wrapped in a robe, towel in hand, James had already taken his place back on the couch, staring blankly at the television, the remote limp in his grip. "Everything all right?" she asked, smiling easily as she picked up her phone and quickly began typing. "Just tired," James murmured, his voice flat, concealing the chaos within. That night, sleep eluded him. Lying next to her in the dark, he stared up at the ceiling, the image of that message burning behind his eyes. How could she lie so effortlessly? What consumed him wasn't fury. It was heartbreak. The realization that the woman he had devoted his life to could betray him so thoughtlessly cut deeper than anger ever could. The next morning, Erin woke early, slipped into a crisp business outfit, and rolled her suitcase to the door. "Wish me luck," she said, leaning in to kiss him. "Big meeting today." Her smile suggested nothing was amiss. James forced a grin in return and gave a small wave. "Drive safe," he said, masking the weight behind every word. As her car disappeared down the road, he remained in the doorway, unmoving. He already knew exactly where she was headed, and he knew what he had to do. Staying behind wasn't an option. The waiting was unbearable, every minute thick with dread. With the note still tucked in his pocket, James grabbed his keys and headed for the Sunset Breeze Hotel, nestled in a scenic coastal town nearly 2 hours away. As the miles passed beneath his tires, memories flooded in. Wedding vows, shared jokes, quiet nights. He didn't want to believe she was capable of this, but the doubt was tearing him apart. When he reached the hotel parking lot, his heart sank. Erin's car sat near the entrance, unmistakable. Seeing it there was like a punch to the stomach. James parked discreetly at a distance, choosing a spot that gave him a good view without drawing attention. He waited. The minutes dragged painfully by, his eyes fixed on the front entrance. Then, a sleek black vehicle pulled up beside the curb. Russell stepped out with an all-too-familiar self-assured grin. James recognized him immediately. He grabbed a travel bag and headed confidently inside, radiating purpose. In that moment, every last shred of James's uncertainty crumbled. Still, he held back. Now wasn't the time to confront them. First, he needed proof, something undeniable. So he waited, nerves stretched thin. Nearly an hour crept past before the moment arrived. From a less conspicuous exit, Erin and Russell emerged together, chatting and laughing like they were in their own private bubble. Russell reached for her hand, and she accepted it without hesitation, fingers lacing together. They strolled in sync toward the beach, slow and carefree. James stayed rooted in place, pain slicing through him at the sight of that shared intimacy. That touch, it used to belong to him. He couldn't sit idle anymore. The agony was too sharp to bear in silence, yet he had to see the truth with his own eyes. Summoning every ounce of resolve, he climbed out of the car and began to follow, careful to stay hidden among the palm trees lining the sandy path. Each step added a new layer to his heartbreak. They never looked back. Their body language made it clear. They believed they were alone in the world. They spoke softly, exchanged sly smiles, flirted with casual ease. The crash of waves on the shore seemed to mock the turbulence in James's chest. When they reached the beach, Erin let go of Russell's hand, laughing at some joke. She ran her fingers along her shoulders, then tugged the strap of her bikini top. With one fluid motion, she let it fall to the sand. Russell reached for her hand once more, gently leading her down toward the edge of the sea. Hidden behind a cluster of palm trees, James watched in silence. At that moment, the last trace of hope he'd been clinging to quietly died. No longer willing to lurk in the shadows, he emerged from his hiding place, his stride steady and unwavering. His voice pierced the stillness of the beach. "So this is your idea of a business meeting?" Erin spun around at the sound, her expression stunned. She instinctively wrapped her arms across her chest, as if to shield herself, while Russell's previously confident demeanor quickly gave way to visible discomfort. James continued moving toward them, the fury etched on his face unmistakable. "James," Erin began, faltering, "this isn't what you think it is." A bitter laugh escaped James's mouth as he slowly shook his head, disbelief tightening his features. "Is that right?" he said, motioning to the scene before him. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my wife's having an affair with her boss during a so-called work trip." Erin tried to respond, but James didn't allow her the opportunity. His attention shifted, his eyes locking onto Russell with cutting intensity. "And you," he snapped, his tone ice-cold. "You're married too, aren't you? What do you think your wife would say if she saw this?" Russell opened his mouth, but no words came. He looked away, fidgeting uncomfortably beneath James's glare. Erin stood speechless, tears beginning to gather in her eyes, but James had no interest in their excuses. Without another word, he turned around and strode toward the parking lot. Each step away felt like another weight on his chest, but he understood. He couldn't remain in a relationship built on lies. He climbed into his car, slammed the door shut, and pulled out onto the road, leaving behind the two people who had shattered his trust. The silence inside the vehicle was deafening. Though his heart ached, some part of him understood it was time to reclaim his life and walk away from those who never valued his loyalty. As the road unfolded in front of him, the scene he'd witnessed replayed over and over in his mind like a waking nightmare. Memories of laughter, of whispered conversations at night, of shared dreams and plans, all of it now seemed hollow and meaningless. By the time he reached home, the house felt more like a stranger's than a sanctuary. He walked into the bedroom without saying a word, slumped onto the bed, and buried his face in his hands. The reality of what had happened pressed heavily on his shoulders. Deep down, he already knew what needed to be done. An hour passed before he heard the car pull into the garage. Footsteps approached, tentative and slow. James didn't move. Erin stood in the doorway, her expression a painful blend of regret and desperation. "James, please. We need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. He rose wordlessly, walked to the closet, and retrieved a suitcase. Without acknowledging her, he began packing essentials, his movements calm but unyielding. "James," she sobbed, her voice cracking. "Can't we fix this? I know I made a mistake." But before she could finish, the suitcase was zipped shut. James finally looked at her, but the warmth in his gaze was gone, replaced by a cold, unflinching resolve. "My lawyer will reach out," he said flatly, brushing past her as he exited the room. Erin remained frozen in the hallway. She heard the front door shut, then the sound of his car pulling away. The weight of what she had lost settled heavily in her chest. There would be no forgiveness, no second act. In the weeks that followed, James focused on rebuilding his life piece by piece. He cut off all non-essential communication with Erin, leaving their lawyers to handle everything. The divorce proceeded quickly and without resistance. James wasn't looking for vengeance, only finality. When they met to finalize the papers, it was the last time he saw her. She looked drained, worn down by the consequences of her choices. James said nothing as he handed her the signed documents, then walked out of the building without glancing back. That part of his life was closed. He was ready to move forward, this time with people who truly valued trust and sincerity. Erin stood outside the office, the divorce papers clenched in her hands, the weight of her decisions sinking in. Still, one fragile hope clung to her. Maybe, just maybe, a future with Russell was still possible. She drove directly to his office, nerves tangled with anticipation. Upon arrival, she requested a private meeting and was shown inside. Russell stood behind his desk, his demeanor stiff and unreadable. "I signed the divorce papers," Erin said, trying to sound confident. "There's nothing standing in our way now. We can be together." Russell looked at her for a long moment before crossing his arms and exhaling deeply. "Erin, I think you misunderstood." Her pulse quickened. She stepped forward, confusion washing over her. "Misunderstood? What do you mean?" Russell gave a faint, distant smile. There was no trace of affection in it. "I was never planning to leave my wife. My marriage had its flaws, but I never intended to walk away from it." Erin's face began to crumble, but he didn't soften. His voice remained steady and unforgiving. "Tell me, do you really believe I'd ever build something serious with a woman who cheated on her husband?" Russell gave a dry, humorless laugh. "You crossed that line once. What makes you think I'd believe you wouldn't cross it again? With me?" Erin stood frozen, unable to speak. She tried to respond, but Russell raised his hand, cutting her off mid-thought. "There's no point dragging this out. Things at the office have become strained. I don't see a future for you on the team. You should stay home tomorrow. It's time for you to look elsewhere," he added, his tone devoid of emotion. Erin stared at him, her mind struggling to keep up. "Are you letting me go?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Russell gave a nonchalant shrug. "Let's just call it an amicable separation. But yes, you're no longer employed here." The words landed like a punch to the chest. Any last hopes she clung to crumbled in an instant. She had sacrificed her marriage, her career, her reputation, for something that, to Russell, had meant absolutely nothing. Without saying a word, she grabbed her bag and left, her thoughts a chaotic swirl of disbelief at how quickly everything had fallen apart. Russell, unfazed, returned to his desk. He closed the chapter on their relationship with the same detachment he might show when closing a web page: calm, indifferent, done. In the weeks that followed, Erin's world unraveled. Unemployed, isolated, and stripped of the illusions she had wrapped herself in, she found herself floundering. The pride that once fueled her choices had vanished, leaving only the sharp sting of regret. Alone, she thought of James, the one man who might still care enough to listen, the only one who might offer her a second chance. Days went by as she rehearsed the words she hoped would explain her remorse, her sorrow, and her wish to put the pieces back together. Eventually, with trembling resolve, she returned to the house they used to call home. When James opened the door, she barely recognized the man who stood before her. He looked calm, grounded, like someone who had endured heartache and emerged stronger. By contrast, Erin felt like a faint outline of the person she once was, weakened, diminished. "James," she said softly, her voice cracking. "I made a mistake I can never undo, but I'm here because I still love you, and I need you." James studied her in silence, his expression measured and still. He crossed his arms and took a deep breath before answering. "Erin, I believe that you're sorry, but some wounds don't heal." She took a step closer, reaching out as tears streamed freely down her cheeks. "Please, James, I've lost everything. I know I hurt you, but we could begin again, create something new." James gently pulled away and stepped back. "Erin," he said quietly, "I've already started moving forward. And that future doesn't include you." The words, though softly spoken, cut deep. There was no malice in his tone, only a somber finality and a surprising kindness, as if he truly wished her well. "You're strong enough to begin again," he told her. "You'll find your own way, in time. As for me, I already have." And with that, he stepped back inside and closed the door between them for good, ending what remained of their bond with a calm, decisive gesture. Erin stood at the door for a long time, struggling to grasp the reality of what had just happened. Deep down, she knew he was right. The weight of guilt pressed heavily on her, but so did the quiet understanding that she now had to face the consequences of her choices and rebuild her life on her own. Turning away, she walked the familiar path alone. Inside, James remained still, a subtle peace settling over him. For the first time in what felt like ages, he was free. He had reclaimed his life, no longer tethered to betrayal. And so, they parted, forever marked by the past, each bearing the scars and the wisdom that come when trust is shattered and healing begins in its place. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.